Hello YouTube, this is Asiel Baez Day, and I'm here making this video for you guys. This video is called Magical Etiquette when visiting the home of a magical person. Or at least that's what we're going to talk about. There's a lot of times when one of you goes to the house of somebody else. When anybody goes to the house of somebody else, the number one rule is always respect. And that's the whole point of this video, is learning how to go into the house of someone who's spiritual and keeping a certain level of respect. I want to say something. Different traditions, different religions, and different people from different traditions have different rules and follow different customs depending on their own personal religious and spiritual affinity. And based on those customs, there will be certain rules in the house. So I want to start with when visiting the home of someone who's spiritual, you want to know what religion, what tradition they are personally following. Certain religions and certain traditions require you to dress in certain ways when visiting or behave in certain ways when visiting. This is basically for people who are pagan for the most part. Some sort of pagan, any form of pagan. I'm not putting a specific classification to the pagan religion or the pagan practice. I'm just saying someone who's pagan usually has most of these type of rules, or you should keep these things in mind when visiting someone who's pagan. When you're visiting the house, it's always customary that when you are entering the house, as you approach the house of the person and they open the door, when you're walking through the threshold of the house, it's usually customary to say some sort of greeting. In Ocha, we tend to say the words ago ile. Ago ile means with the permission of the house, with the permission of the owner, permission of the spirits, to enter into the house. This is just usually a customary salute or a customary phrase that is said in order to grant permission into the house. I want to tell you guys something also. The ritual rooms, every house it's divided obviously into different rooms. You know, the kitchen, the bathroom, bedroom, etc., etc., etc. The ritual room or the igbulung is always considered a sacred room, obviously, and it's not considered to be one of the actual rooms of the house. It's always considered the temple of the house. So it has the whole point of this video is the entrance of the ritual room. When you walk into the regular house, obviously you behave like normal. When you walk into the ritual room of the house, it's usually when you apply most of the customs and most of the behavior that you're going to. Your behavior in the house will be different than your behavior inside of the room. That's the whole point. So usually when you're walking in, you'll say agoile, or you say some sort of bless or ask for some sort of permission from the spirits, permission from the deities. If the person follows a particular path or particular deity that they worship, as you walk in through the front door, you will say with the permission of so and so, or with the blessing of so and so. So I want to make you guys aware that when you enter the house of someone else, it means that that person's spirits, that the deities are allowing you to enter. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you really want to go somewhere, there seems to be a lot of blocks in the way, and you're trying to make it to someone's house, or you're trying to make it to some place, and there's no way of making it there because every time you leave the house there's some sort of complication? That's usually the universe telling you that today is not the day for you to go there. When you finally do enter into someone's house, it means that the universe has obviously granted you permission to enter into that home. So granted, as you're entering, you want to be thankful and you want to make sure that you are in complete consciousness of the act that you're doing. You're entering someone else's domain, someone else's space, someone else's living quarters. So I want to make sure that everyone remembers to be respectful. Always follow the rules of the house, obviously. Whatever they tell you that you can and cannot do, make sure that you do it while you're inside of the house. Certain religions, certain houses will require you to smell a certain way, so they'll usually provide a cologne if you don't have any, or a specific smell. They might require you, depending on the deity, they might require you to dress in a certain way. For example, when you're visiting the house of an Orisha priest like mine who has a Chun crown, there technically doesn't tend to be too many taboos, besides the fact that if you're smelling bad, obviously we'll try and spray you down a little bit before you walk into the room, because Oshun doesn't like bad smells, for example. But she doesn't require much of anything else. If you are someone who's visiting the home, Shanti, sit down. Sorry, my dog, and you just hear the little paws all over. If you're someone visiting the house of a priest, for example, of the Orisha Yewa, that Orisha will require you, by the simple fact of walking into the house, they'll require you with certain taboos of clothing and of smell that Oshun, for example, won't require. Another Orisha like Obatala, for example, if you're dressed in black, you might want to cover yourself in white prior to approaching this Orisha. So it'll depend usually on the Orisha, and the person whom you're visiting is the one who's in charge of letting you know if there's any particular rules to follow. Do not touch things, okay, when you visit people's homes. This is a big no-no, and this is a big, this usually turns out into everybody, when they see something that they like, they automatically want to touch it. Everybody is just, we see with our eyes, not with our hands, but we internalize more when we're touching it, and we get a closer feeling of the object. So do not touch things, especially things that are clearly religious, and do not wait until the person gives you the permission to even be able to allow to touch things. So what do I want to get with this? Specifically, I'm speaking about tools, ritual tools. I'm speaking about statues. I'm speaking about shrines. I'm speaking about things that are on the shrines. I don't care if it's a little ball. I don't care if it's a pen. If it's something that's on the shrine of somebody else, you just do not touch it. You can stare at it as much as you want. You do not touch it until that person gives you the permission to touch it. You never know what that object is being used for, or what the purpose of that object is. So you really cannot be touching things. When you touch things, you're leaving energy of your own body upon those instruments. It is a scientific proven fact that when you touch anything, regardless of what it is, you leave your fingerprint, you're leaving your sweat, you're leaving your dead skin cells on that particular object. So obviously that all carries your energy. You're influencing your with your aura that particular object. If that object belongs to someone else and they have it consecrated for whatever particular use, they might not appreciate that you're leaving your energy all over it. So always look, don't touch. The rule of thumb with this is to always put your hands behind your back as you're looking, and that way you just don't touch. You just lean forward and you stare with your eyes. You appreciate something. You can say, for example, wow, that's such a beautiful tool, but you're just simply appreciating. You're appreciating with your eyes. You're not appreciating with your fingers. When the person gives you the permission to touch it, then you can go crazy and you can touch it, because they're already allowing your influence to be upon that object also, or they know why they want to do it. But yes, always wait, always look, but do not touch. When you see something that's a bit odd, you can question it, but do not try to change it. Magical people from different backgrounds and from different traditions may have things that regular people or average people or people who are not following something weird may not normally do. For example, a very big common when it comes to the Orisha community in particular, A big thing that a lot of people find interesting and odd is to walk into the house of an Orisha priest and noticing that in the kitchen there's no knives. Yet when you open the fridge, there's a set of knives stuck in the fridge. Like, who puts their knives in the fridge? Well, people in Orisha tradition put their knives in the fridge, and there's reasons why we put the knives in the fridge, and that's usually based upon divination. So if you go to the house of someone who's, you know, it's magical, and you open up the fridge and they have knives in there, don't pull them out and put them on top of the counter just because in your house your knives live on top of the counter. Another odd thing will be like offerings. There's sometimes people that walk in and they'll see like offerings on the floor, like a piece of food or something. When things like that, or like food on a plate that it's in a corner or something like that. When you're someone who when you walk into the house with someone who's magical and you see things like that, that means that that's probably some sort of offering. Don't pick it up and try and clean the plate. Although you have good intentions, you should ask, why is this here? Is there a reason why this food is on the floor? So always, whenever you notice that something is odd, the people may have certain things. They may have things like hidden. They may have things in view. Sometimes certain people are asked to put certain things in view, like a particular weapon, or they're asked to put a particular weapon inside of a particular room. Okay, so if that happens and you notice that there's a knife in the bathroom, then you should ask, why is there a knife in the bathroom, instead of just getting that knife and removing it away from the bathroom. Always ask before you take action with moving things in the house, in somebody else's house, especially the house of someone who's magical. Be aware of rules when entering the magical room. Most of the times when entering the magical room or the sacred space of the person, there's usually some sort of knocking by the door. The knocking of the door usually has two meanings behind it, or two reasons why people do it. Reason number one why you knock prior to entering the sacred space is because it is customary and respectful. When you're entering the house of anybody, or you're entering the bedroom of any person, you normally knock. It means, it signals a person that there's someone interested in entering, and it signals a person to be aware that the door is about to be disturbed, so they can stop anything that they might be doing. So you always knock out of respect to the Orishas, out of respect to the deities that live past that door, or the curtain, depending on the tradition. The second part is that sometimes it's said that in the magical space, when you have a space that is magically dedicated for nothing but religion, it starts to accumulate power. It starts to accumulate energy from rituals, from meditations, from whatever practices it is that you do in there. From calling the deities. As the more and more you call the deities, it's said that all that ashe, all that power accumulates inside of the room, which makes manifestations of the deities easier. So as they're living inside of the room, and the room is gaining space, their manifestation, their physicality can become more visible. So it might be that you open the door unexpectedly, and one of the deities in a third person point of view, a third person aspect, physical aspect, or magical astral aspect of the deity has been manifesting inside of the room for whatever reason, and you might get yourself a surprise, or you might see things, or you might see shadows, or whatever. The point is that the knocking will alert the deity, so then everything dissipates into the proper atmosphere, into the proper astral plane. In case that there was, at that point, in case there might have been some sort of manifestation, some manifestations might be scary, so you always knock prior to entering into the rooms. For the most part, you always knock prior to entering into the rooms. I want to make sure that you guys know that when you walk into the sacred space of someone, into the Igbolum of someone, especially if it's an Igbolum where there's Orishas living inside, please, 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 you guys, you have to be in your best behavior when you walk into those type of rooms. Do not release gas, meaning do not fart. if you have to fart, if you have to release gas from your intestines, that's okay. You just simply walk out of that room and do it in the bathroom or do it outside. Even if the people that you're with are close friends or relatives or something, you don't, it's not appreciated for someone to release gas inside of the sacred space of somebody else. So make sure that the room is smelling nice and make sure that you leave it smelling nice. Don't curse. Don't be saying bad words in front of the Orishas. I'm saying the Orishas in particular because obviously that's my tradition, but this goes to anybody. Again, any religious room is a sacred room, so your language should also be kept to appropriate language. Don't fool around and be joking. Sometimes people keep certain things that are fragile inside of their ritual rooms. Don't fool around. Don't be dancing. Don't be doing things that they haven't allowed you to do, or that it's not being called to at that moment. For example, if you're Wiccan and you're doing some sort of ritual, and you're obviously going to be dancing at some sort of point of the ritual, that's perfectly fine. But you know where to dance. If you are just walking, excuse me. If you're just walking into the room, don't just go off dancing. You don't know what's happening inside of the room. You don't know things. You obviously want to make sure you don't knock anything over. Obviously, everything's going to have a difference between the deity, the ruling deity, your personal friendship with a person, and the rules that the person follows. But just make sure that you're always aware of what the person allows or does not allow you to do. When you enter the altar room or the main room, the sanctum sanctorum or the ballroom, whatever it is you want to call it, you always want to greet the main deity of the room. If you know that the person that you're visiting is a priest or a priestess of a particular deity, and a particular orisha or a particular entity, when you walk into the sacred space, they're usually going to have, obviously, an altar dedicated to that particular deity. It is customary to give thanks to the altar, to give thanks to the deity. This can be done from far away, or this can be done by approaching the altar, or whatever particular tradition that they follow. And this you should obviously ask the person as to, how do I salute your deity? And then they'll guide you if they allow people to do it or not. The point is that if that deity allowed you to walk into the house, and then the deity allowed you to walk into their sacred space, it's obviously a sign that they are allowing you, that they're opening the doors to you. So you should give some sort of greeting, as is customary, as it would make sense, to that particular deity. Give thanks. It could be something very simple like, hey, you can just simply say hello to the deity from far away. You can sit close to them. You can ring bells or shake rattles or whatever it is that the deity requires you as a greeting to do. But the point is to at least be grateful to the deity itself. That way the deity notices that you're a grateful person, and that way the deity feels respected, that they have allowed you to come in and you are giving them their due respect. You are acknowledging the fact that they have allowed you to come in. It is also customary to try, especially if that is your first time visiting the home, especially if it is your first time visiting the home of an Orisha priest. Okay, it is customary to take some sort of offering to the deity, like 2 candles, flowers, fruits. Something that you know that the deity likes, something you know that the Orisha likes. It is always customary, at least if it's your first time. If you're a godchild of the house, frequently you give something, or like a couple of times a year you'll give something to your godfather's Orisha, to the crown. You'll bring some sort of offering. You'll give you'll do something nice for the Orisha. But if this is just you're visiting and this is your first time, normally you'll just take some sort of small token, something small, to the deity and give it as thanks, as a little offering, or you give it to the person and then they give it to the deity. Very important rule is not to steal. Everybody likes things. We all find something that we're attracted to. When you go into the house of someone who's magical, you might find things that are a little odd, you might find things that are a little unusual, and you might find things that are attracting to you. Now, again, you can always ask, where did you get this from? But do not steal things, especially things that are magical. Things that are magical and spiritual have been dedicated for that purpose, and by the time that you're probably going to steal them, they have probably already been consecrated and dedicated to the name of a particular deity, or it has been consecrated with a particular, like orisha, like it has gone through a sign, it has gone through something that has made it magical. When you're stealing a magical object, it does not matter the tradition or the religion, you're not really stealing it from the person anymore. You're stealing it from the deity that the object belongs to. If this piece of paper where I have my notes on, it's just a simple piece of paper and it belongs to me. The minute that I get this piece of paper and I dedicate it magically, spiritually to whatever, to whatever purpose, or to whomever, to whatever deity, the paper no longer belongs to me. Although it resides, the physicality resides with me, the spiritual essence of the paper is dedicated to that entity. So if the whole thing technically belongs to the entity. By you stealing this piece of paper, you're not stealing it no longer from me, you're stealing it from the entity themselves. So the offense is always to the entity, it's not to the person. Obviously, if you go to the home of someone and you steal something, they're going to be upset. Nobody likes to be stolen. So make sure that when you go to the house of any person, you are kept on your best behavior, and your 5-finger discounts do not ever apply to the house of any person. 5-finger discounts do not apply anywhere. When something magical is given to you, for example, plates. Well, let me get into that. If you visit the house of someone magical for a particular something, and they're giving you something to take home, make sure that whatever you have to return, that you return it back. A lot of people in Ocha, for example, we tend to have plates that are just strictly for Orisha rituals. Some people do, some people don't. Some people use regular house plates, but the majority of us tend to have a set of white plates that is strictly for Orisha ceremonies, to be used in different things. So if plates are handed to you after so much use, those plates are dedicated to the Orishas, or religious plates. Obviously, they're carrying a che from all the use that they've been getting and all the use that they're gonna get. Always return the plates back. If you're giving a hat, return the hat back. Whatever you're given that has to come back, make sure that you put the effort. And obviously, the person's gonna let you know whether or not that object needs to make it back into the house. Things cost money, people. Let's be honest. Plates cost money. They might cost $1, but after you give away 20 plates, you've lost $20, and then you have to re-put those $20 back. So always give the object back to the person. If the person lets you know this object needs to return, you need to then make the effort to return the object. Okay. And this goes for cloths, and like if they give you a piece of cloth for to like wrap something and take it home, make sure you return the cloth back. If they give you a bag, I don't care what it is, whatever people give to you that belongs to the temple area, that belongs to the sacred deity, to the sacred space, always return it back. Make sure that you put the effort of being thankful for utilizing that object, and then return it back. These are just some little magical rules, magical pointers to keep you guys on track when visiting the home of someone who's spiritual, the home of someone who's sacred. If you visit the home of someone who's spiritual, for example, or religious, like a priest from Christianity or a nun or something like that, they obviously might require you to have different taboos or different rules or applications for you to, not applications, or ways of you entering the house or whatnot. It depends on the tradition, it depends on the person, it depends on their personal desires and their personal rules of how they keep their temple. Everybody's home is their own personal temple. So just always keep things in mind. The number one rule that you're never ever going to go wrong with is respect. Ask things and always be respectful of whatever answers you get. So that's pretty much it for this video. I want to give you guys thanks for watching me again, and I will see you in the next video. Ache, 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 do. Bye, you guys. Every house it's divided obviously into different rooms. You know, the kitchen, the bathroom, bedroom, etc., etc., etc. The ritual room or the igbulung is always considered a sacred room, obviously, and it's not considered to be one of the actual rooms of the house. It's always considered the temple of the house. So it has other. The whole point of this video is the entrance of the ritual room. When you walk into the regular house, obviously you behave like normal. When you walk into the ritual room of the house, it's usually when you apply most of the customs and most of the behavior that you're going to. Your behavior in the house will be different than your behavior inside of the room. It's the whole point. So usually when you're walking in, you'll say a goile, or you say some sort of bless, or ask for some sort of permission from the spirits, permission from the spiritual affinity. And based on those customs, there will be certain rules in the house. So I want to start with when visiting the home of someone who's spiritual, you want to know what religion, what tradition they are personally following. Certain religions and certain traditions require you to dress in certain ways when visiting, or behave in certain ways when visiting. This is basically for people who are pagan for the most part, some sort of pagan, any form of pagan. I'm not putting a specific classification to the pagan religion or the pagan practice. I'm just saying someone who's pagan usually has most of these type of rules, or you should keep these things in mind when visiting someone who's pagan. When you're visiting the house, it's always customary that when you are entering the house, as you approach the house of the person and they open the door, when you're walking through the threshold of the house, it's usually customary to say some sort of greeting. In Ocha, we tend to say the words agoile. Agoile means with the permission of the house, with the permission of the owner, permission of the spirits, to enter into the house. This is just usually a customary salute or a customary phrase that is said in order to grant permission into the house. I want to tell you guys something also. The ritual rooms, the houses, the deities, if the person follows a particular path or particular deity that they worship, as you walk in through the front door, you will say with the permission of so and so, or with the blessing of so and so. So I want to make you guys aware that when you enter the house of someone else, it means that that person's spirits, that the deities are allowing you to enter. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you really want to go somewhere, there seems to be a lot of blocks in the way, and you're trying to make it to someone's house, or you're trying to make it to some place, and there's no way of making it there because every time you leave the house there's some sort of complication? That's usually the universe telling you that today is not the day for you to go there. When you finally do enter into someone's house, it means that the universe has obviously granted you permission to enter into that home. So Hello YouTube, this is Asiel Baez Soñé, and I'm here making this video for you guys. This video is called Magical Etiquette when visiting the home of a magical person. Or at least that's what we're going to talk about. There's a lot of times when one of you goes to the house of somebody else. When anybody goes to the house of somebody else, the number one rule is always respect. And that's the whole point of this video, is learning how to go into the house of someone who's spiritual and keeping a certain level of respect. I want to say something. Different different traditions, different religions, and different people from different traditions have different rules and follow different customs depending on their own personal religious and